I was standing in the doorway of my own dining room, holding a crystal pitcher of iced tea, when I heard my son-in-law Marcus say those words that would change everything. I married her out of pity. No one else wanted this fat pig. His mother laughed first, then his father, then his sister. The sound of their applause still echoes in my nightmares. My daughter Emily sat there with her head down, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, and something inside me cracked open like a fault line before an earthquake. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching this from. Because what I'm about to share with you is a warning that every parent needs to hear, no matter where you live in this world. My name is Margaret Sutherland, and I'm 58 years old. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, in a historic home that's been in my family for 3 generations. My late husband Robert and I built a commercial real estate empire over 30 years of marriage. When he passed away from a heart attack 4 years ago, he left me with a portfolio worth approximately $18 million, 6 rental properties, and an investment firm that generates steady income. I never remarried. My daughter Emily was my whole world. She was 29 years old, brilliant, kind, with a master's degree in art history and a heart bigger than the Atlantic Ocean. Yes, she was overweight. She'd struggled with her weight since adolescence, and I'd watched her fight that battle with grace and dignity her entire life. Marcus Holloway came into our lives 2 years ago. He was 32, handsome in that calculated way that some men cultivate, worked in pharmaceutical sales, and had a family pedigree that included old Charleston money that had long since evaporated. His parents, Richard and Constance Holloway, lived in a crumbling mansion in the historic district, maintaining appearances while drowning in debt. I learned this later. At the time, I thought Marcus was charming. Emily was radiant when she introduced him to me. They married after a whirlwind 8-month courtship. I funded their wedding. $60,000 for a ceremony at the Middleton Place Plantation Gardens. I bought them a house as a wedding gift, a beautiful 3-bedroom property in Mount Pleasant worth $500,000. I set up a trust fund for their future children. I did this because I loved my daughter and I wanted her to be happy, and because Marcus had convinced me he adored her. The first strange sign came 3 months after the wedding. Emily called me crying because Marcus had insisted she add his name to the deed of the house. When she hesitated, he'd accused her of not trusting him, of treating him like a child, of emasculating him in front of his family. She added his name. I felt uneasy, but I told myself that married couples share assets. That was normal. The second sign came when Marcus started asking detailed questions about my estate planning. How was my will structured? Who were my beneficiaries? What would happen to my properties if something happened to me? He framed these questions as concern, as a son-in-law wanting to make sure Emily would be taken care of. But the frequency and specificity of his questions made my skin crawl. He wanted numbers. He wanted timelines. He wanted to know about my life insurance policies. Then came the incident with the financial planner. I'd scheduled a meeting to review my portfolio, and Marcus somehow learned about it. He showed up uninvited with a folder full of investment proposals, suggesting I restructure my entire estate to include him as a co-trustee. He said it was for Emily's protection. He said I was getting older and might need help managing my assets. He used words like cognitive decline and fiduciary responsibility with a smile that never reached his eyes. I declined politely, but I started paying attention. The third sign was the shift in how he treated Emily in my presence. Small comments at first. Jokes about her appearance that cut just a little too deep. Suggestions that she skipped dessert. Comparisons to other women. I watched my confident daughter become smaller and quieter over the course of 6 months. She started wearing baggy clothes. She stopped meeting my eyes. When I asked if everything was okay, she assured me Marcus was just stressed about work. Then 4 months ago, I received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was a woman named Jennifer Moss. She identified herself as Marcus's ex-fiancée from Atlanta. She'd tracked me down through social media after seeing Emily's wedding photos. What she told me made my blood run cold. Marcus had a pattern. He targeted women from wealthy families, particularly women who struggled with self-esteem issues. He'd dated Jennifer for a year, convinced her to give him access to her trust fund, and embezzled over $200,000 before she discovered the fraud. She'd been too humiliated to press charges, too afraid of the scandal. But she'd been watching his social media, and when she saw he'd married Emily, she felt compelled to warn me. I thanked her and immediately hired a private investigator. His name was Thomas Brennan, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes. What he uncovered over the next 6 weeks was a nightmare. Marcus had attempted the same scheme with at least 3 other women in the past 7 years, one in Savannah, one in Charlotte, and Jennifer in Atlanta. He'd refined his approach each time, learning from his mistakes. The pattern was always the same: romance, marriage, access to assets, and then a carefully orchestrated plan to either drain accounts or position himself to inherit. Thomas found something else. Marcus had taken out a life insurance policy on Emily without her knowledge. He'd forged her signature. The policy was for $2 million, and Marcus was the sole beneficiary. When Thomas showed me the documents, I felt something break inside my chest. This man was planning to kill my daughter. The evidence got worse. Thomas tracked Marcus's communications and found encrypted messages between Marcus and his parents. They were in on it. The entire Holloway family had conspired to marry Marcus into my family to access my wealth. The messages discussed timelines, inheritance laws, and shockingly casual conversations about making Emily's death look like an accident. They discussed her weight as an advantage, something that would make a heart attack or stroke seem plausible. They discussed the stairs in their Mount Pleasant house. They discussed medication interactions. I had never felt rage like that before. It was a physical sensation, like electricity in my veins. But I'm a businesswoman. I've negotiated million-dollar deals and outmaneuvered competitors in boardrooms for 3 decades. I knew that rage without strategy was useless. So I made a plan. I contacted an attorney named Patricia Reeves, one of the best criminal lawyers in South Carolina. I brought her every piece of evidence Thomas had collected. She reviewed everything methodically, then looked at me over her reading glasses and said something I'll never forget. "Margaret, you have enough here to destroy them. But we need to be smart about this. We need them to incriminate themselves further, and we need to protect Emily immediately." We brought in Detective Sarah Chen from the Charleston Police Department Fraud Division. Sarah was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a reputation for taking white-collar crime personally. She listened to everything, reviewed the evidence, and agreed to open an investigation. But she needed more. She needed recorded confessions, witnesses, irrefutable proof of conspiracy and intent. That's when Patricia suggested something audacious. We would set a trap. We would create a situation where the Holloways would reveal their true intentions in front of witnesses, where Marcus would show his real face. It was risky, but Emily's life was at stake. I didn't tell Emily any of this. I couldn't risk her accidentally revealing something to Marcus. Instead, I told her I wanted to host a family lunch at my house, a celebration of nothing in particular, just family togetherness. She seemed surprised, but pleased. She said Marcus would love it. That sentence broke my heart. For 2 weeks, I prepared. Patricia and Detective Chen installed hidden cameras throughout my dining room and living room. They were sophisticated, nearly invisible, positioned to capture every angle. We also equipped me with a recording device, a tiny microphone that looked like a decorative pin on my dress. Thomas Brennan would be stationed in a van outside with audio equipment. 2 undercover officers would be positioned as gardeners in my backyard, within sight of the windows. The plan was simple. I would create an environment where Marcus felt comfortable enough to drop his mask. I would praise him excessively, talk about my estate in front of his parents, mention my health problems, and give him every opportunity to reveal his intentions. Patricia coached me on body language, tone, questions that would prompt specific responses. She told me to think of it as a performance, the most important performance of my life. The lunch was scheduled for a Sunday in late September. The weather was perfect, one of those clear Charleston days where the sunlight makes everything look like a painting. I'd prepared all of Marcus's favorite foods, an elaborate spread that cost over $1,000 from a catering service. Shrimp and grits, she-crab soup, fried green tomatoes, pecan-crusted chicken, sweet tea, and a bourbon chocolate cake for dessert. Marcus and Emily arrived first. Emily was wearing a loose floral dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked tired. Marcus was all smiles, kissing my cheek, complimenting my home as if he were seeing it for the first time. Richard and Constance Holloway arrived 15 minutes later in their aging Mercedes, dressed in clothes that had been expensive a decade ago. Constance immediately began commenting on my antique furniture, calculating its value with her eyes. We sat down to lunch. I played my role perfectly. I gushed about how wonderful it was to have family together. I mentioned casually that I'd been feeling some chest pains lately, that my doctor wanted me to get some tests done. I saw Marcus's eyes light up at that. I talked about how I'd been reviewing my will, how I wanted to make sure Emily would be taken care of, how important it was that she had a strong husband to manage things if something happened to me. Richard Holloway leaned forward at that. "Margaret, that's very wise. Estate planning is crucial at your age. Marcus has been studying investment strategies that could really maximize your portfolio's growth." I smiled and nodded. "Oh, I'd love to hear more about that. You know, I've been thinking about restructuring some things. I have this property in Colombia that's been sitting vacant. It's worth about $1-2 million. I've been wondering if I should sell it or put it in a trust for Emily." Marcus set down his fork. "A trust is smart, but you want to make sure it's structured properly. You don't want the tax burden to fall on Emily. It might make more sense to transfer the property directly to her now, or put both our names on it so we can manage it together." There it was, the first hook. Patricia had told me he wouldn't be able to resist talking about assets. I poured more sweet tea. "That's interesting. I hadn't thought about putting both your names on it. Would that make things easier?" "Absolutely," Marcus said, his voice smooth. "Emily and I are a unit now. What's hers is mine. What's mine is hers. That's what marriage is about." Emily smiled weakly at that, but I noticed she wasn't eating. She'd barely touched her food. Constance Holloway dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "Margaret, you really have done such a wonderful job building your wealth. Robert would be so proud. It must be exhausting managing everything alone." "It is," I admitted. "Some days I feel so tired. I've been having these dizzy spells too. Just little moments where the room seems to tilt." I saw Marcus and his mother exchange a glance. It was quick, but I caught it. "Have you told your doctor about the dizzy spells?" Marcus asked, his voice dripping with false concern. "Not yet. I keep forgetting to mention it at appointments. You know how it is when you get older. You forget things." Richard Holloway chuckled. "Oh, we understand completely. Constance here can barely remember where she put her keys half the time." Constance shot him a look, but recovered quickly. "What Richard means is that cognitive changes are normal as we age. But Margaret, you should really be more careful. Dizzy spells can be serious. What if you fell down your stairs? You live alone in this big house. That's dangerous." I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my expression neutral. "You're right. I should be more careful. Maybe I should update my life insurance policy too. I haven't looked at it in years." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "How much coverage do you have currently?" "Oh, I think around $3 million. But the premiums are getting expensive. I've been thinking about reducing it." "Don't do that," Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. He caught himself and softened his tone. "I mean, you should keep your coverage robust. Think about Emily. Think about your legacy. $3 million might not even be enough given inflation and your asset portfolio." I nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe you're right. I just worry about being a burden. I know Emily has her own life now, her own family to think about." That's when Emily spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. Her voice was small. "Mom, you're not a burden. You'll never be a burden." Marcus reached over and patted her hand in a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt condescending. "Of course she's not a burden, honey. Your mother is a treasure. We're lucky to have her." The lunch continued. I served the main course. We made small talk. Richard Holloway drank 3 glasses of bourbon. Constance kept steering the conversation back to my assets, my properties, my investments. Marcus was calculating something. I could see it in his eyes. He was running numbers. Then came dessert. I brought out the bourbon chocolate cake, rich and decadent. I cut generous slices for everyone. Emily hesitated when I put a piece in front of her. "I shouldn't," she said quietly. "Oh, come on, honey," I encouraged. "It's a special occasion." Marcus's expression hardened. "Emily's been trying to watch her weight. Haven't you, sweetheart?" Emily's cheeks flushed red. "You just thought you'd undo 3 months of gym work with 1 piece of cake," Marcus interrupted. His tone was light, but there was an edge to it. Constance laughed. "Oh, Marcus, let the girl have dessert. Though I must say, Emily dear, you have put on a bit of weight since the wedding. Marriage does that to women, doesn't it? They get comfortable." Emily's face crumbled. She stared at her plate. I felt my hands clench under the table, but I needed to wait. Patricia had told me to wait for the perfect moment. Richard Holloway, emboldened by bourbon, decided to join in. "You know what they say. The first year of marriage you gain weight, the second year you lose it. Of course, that's if you have motivation to lose it." He winked at Marcus. Marcus smiled. A cruel smile. "Yeah, well, some people have more motivation than others." Emily stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." She practically ran from the dining room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard a door close. My heart was breaking for her, but I stayed seated. I needed them to keep talking. As soon as Emily was gone, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Constance's polite mask slipped. "Honestly, Marcus, I don't know how you do it. That girl has gained at least 20 pounds since the wedding." Marcus shrugged and took a bite of cake. "It's a sacrifice, but it'll be worth it. Another year, maybe 2, and we'll have everything we need." My blood went cold. Another year or 2. That was a timeline. That was intent. Richard leaned forward conspiratorially. "Have you made progress on the life insurance situation?" Marcus nodded. "The policy is active, $2 million on Emily. I'm listed as beneficiary. The beauty of it is her weight works in our favor. If something happens, nobody will question it. Heart attack, stroke, diabetes complications. She's a walking health risk." Constance raised her glass. "To forward thinking." They clinked glasses. They were celebrating. They were celebrating their plan to kill my daughter. I stood up then. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor. All 3 of them looked at me, startled by the sound. "Margaret, are you all right?" Marcus asked, his mask sliding back into place. I walked to the doorway where I'd been standing earlier, the same spot where I'd heard that horrible comment. I picked up the crystal pitcher of iced tea, but I didn't pour it. I just held it, feeling its weight in my hands. I smiled at them. A big, warm smile. "I just realized I forgot to tell you all something," I said pleasantly. "I've made some changes to my estate planning recently. Very recent changes." Marcus's expression became alert. "Oh, what kind of changes?" "Well," I said, setting down the pitcher and walking back to the table. "I've been working with a wonderful attorney named Patricia Reeves. You might have heard of her. She specializes in criminal law, fraud, inheritance disputes, that sort of thing." I saw Marcus's face pale slightly. Constance set down her glass. "Why would you need a criminal attorney for estate planning?" Richard asked slowly. "Because," I said, my smile never wavering, "I've discovered some very interesting things over the past few months. Things about life insurance policies taken out without consent. Things about forged signatures. Things about conspiracy to commit fraud and murder." The room went dead silent. Marcus's face had gone from pale to gray. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice cracked. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I played a recording. Marcus's voice came through clearly. "Another year, maybe 2, and we'll have everything we need." Then Richard's voice. "Have you made progress on the life insurance situation?" Then Marcus again. "The policy is active. $2 million on Emily. The beauty of it is, her weight works in our favor. If something happens, nobody will question it." Constance Holloway started to stand, but I held up my hand. "Sit down," I said, and my voice had steel in it now. "You're going to sit down and listen to every single word I have to say." She sat. "For the past 3 months," I continued, "I've been working with a private investigator, the Charleston Police Department Fraud Division, and a criminal attorney. We know everything. We know about Jennifer Moss in Atlanta. We know about the $200,000 you stole from her. We know about the women in Savannah and Charlotte. We have records of your encrypted communications planning my daughter's death. We have evidence of insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder." Marcus lunged to his feet. "You can't prove any of that. You're making this up. You're a paranoid old woman who has this entire lunch on video," I interrupted calmly. "There are cameras in this room, Marcus. There have been cameras in this room for 2 weeks. Every word you've said today has been recorded. The comment about Emily being a fat pig that I overheard when I was standing in that doorway earlier, which by the way was before you all sat down and I hadn't confronted you yet. That was recorded too. Your discussions about timelines and life insurance, all recorded." Richard Holloway's face had turned purple. "This is entrapment. This is illegal." "Actually," said a new voice from the doorway, "it's completely legal." Detective Sarah Chen walked into the dining room, followed by 2 uniformed officers. She was holding handcuffs. "Marcus Holloway, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Richard and Constance Holloway, you're under arrest as accessories to conspiracy to commit murder and fraud." The next few minutes were chaos. Constance started screaming about lawyers. Richard tried to bolt for the back door and was intercepted by the undercover officers who'd been positioned in the garden. Marcus just stood there, his face blank with shock, as Detective Chen read him his rights and cuffed his hands behind his back. I walked to the stairs and called up to Emily. "Sweetheart, you can come down now." She appeared at the top of the stairs, her face red from crying. She saw the police officers, saw Marcus in handcuffs, and froze. "Mom, what's happening?" I climbed the stairs and took her hands in mine. "I need you to be strong right now. I need you to listen to me. Marcus was planning to hurt you. He took out a life insurance policy on you without your permission. He was planning to kill you for the money. His parents were helping him." Emily's legs buckled. I caught her and held her as she started to sob. "I don't understand. He loved me. He said he loved me." "No, baby," I whispered into her hair. "He never loved you. He was using you. But you're safe now. You're safe, and he's going to pay for everything he's done." Detective Chen approached us carefully. "Mrs. Sutherland, Emily, I know this is overwhelming. We're going to need you both to come to the station to give formal statements, but take your time. We have the suspects in custody." I nodded. I held my daughter as they led Marcus and his parents out of my house. Marcus turned back once before they put him in the police car. He looked at me, and I saw something ugly in his eyes. Not remorse, not fear, just cold calculation, even now, trying to figure out how to manipulate his way out of this. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled, the same smile I'd given him earlier. And I said loud enough for him to hear, "I told you I was reviewing my estate planning. What I didn't mention was that I also removed you from Emily's will, had the house deed transferred back to her name only, and filed a restraining order against you and your entire family. You get nothing. You are nothing. And you're going to prison for a very long time." The look on his face was worth everything. The fear, the planning, the sleepless nights, all of it. Because I saw the moment he realized he'd lost. completely. The trial took 8 months. Patricia Reeves was brilliant. She presented every piece of evidence methodically, building an airtight case. The videos from the lunch were played in court. When the jury saw Marcus discussing my daughter's weight as an advantage for staging her death, several of them looked physically ill. When they heard Constance's toast to forward thinking about insurance money, the verdict was essentially decided. The prosecution also brought in Jennifer Moss, who testified about Marcus's previous fraud. They brought in the insurance agent who Marcus had worked with to forge Emily's signature. They brought in the technology expert who decrypted the messages between Marcus and his parents. Every piece of evidence was presented with devastating clarity. Marcus's defense tried to claim he was joking, that the conversations at lunch were taken out of context, that he loved Emily and would never hurt her. But the life insurance policy with the forged signature was impossible to explain away. The pattern of previous fraud was impossible to ignore. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Marcus was found guilty on all counts: insurance fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted theft by deception. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. Richard and Constance were sentenced to 10 years each as accessories. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Catherine Morrison, looked at all 3 of them before sentencing and said something I'll never forget. "You targeted a vulnerable woman. You exploited her insecurities. You manipulated her love. You planned her death as casually as planning a vacation. This court sees you for exactly what you are, predators. And this court will ensure you never have the opportunity to prey on anyone ever again." The investigation expanded after the trial. Detectives found evidence linking Marcus to 2 other potential victims, women he'd dated briefly and who'd reported strange incidents, unexplained illnesses, medication tampering, near accidents. Those cases are still being investigated. Emily and I worked through everything together. She started therapy immediately after the arrest. It was hard, so hard watching her process the betrayal. She blamed herself at first, convinced that if she'd been thinner, prettier, different, that Marcus might have actually loved her. It took months of therapy for her to understand that nothing she could have done would have changed who Marcus was. He was a predator. She was never the problem. She's doing better now. She moved back home with me for a while, then eventually found her own place, a small cottage downtown that she's decorated with her art history expertise. She went back to work at the Gibbs Museum, where she's now a curator. She started dating again, carefully, slowly, with a therapist's support. She joined a support group for people who've survived domestic abuse and manipulation. She's rebuilding herself, piece by piece. As for me, I learned something about the depth of a mother's love. I learned that I would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect my child. I would set traps and wear wires and smile at monsters if it meant keeping her safe. I would stand up in a room full of predators and burn their world down without hesitation. But I also learned something about systemic failures. Marcus had done this before, multiple times, and no one had stopped him because his victims were too ashamed, too afraid of judgment, too traumatized to come forward. The system had failed Jennifer Moss and the others. It nearly failed Emily. So I've made it my mission to change that. I've funded a foundation called the Emily Sutherland Foundation for Financial Abuse Awareness. We provide legal support for victims of financial fraud within families. We offer resources for people who suspect their partners or family members are manipulating them for money. We train law enforcement on the warning signs of inheritance fraud and life insurance schemes. We've helped 17 families so far, and we're just getting started. I also speak publicly about what happened. I do interviews, I tell our story, because I want other parents to know the warning signs. I want other people to understand that abuse doesn't always look like physical violence. Sometimes it looks like a charming son-in-law who asks too many questions about your estate planning. Sometimes it looks like someone who isolates your child and destroys their self-worth so systematically that they stop believing they deserve better. And I want to say this directly to anyone watching who might see themselves in Emily's story. You are not the problem. Your weight, your appearance, your perceived flaws, none of that justifies how someone treats you. If someone claims to love you while systematically destroying your self-esteem, that's not love. If someone is unusually interested in your family's finances, in your inheritance, in your insurance policies, pay attention to that instinct that tells you something is wrong. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Reach out to professionals. Don't let shame or embarrassment stop you from protecting yourself. Because predators like Marcus rely on that shame. They weaponize it. They count on you being too humiliated to expose them. Emily reads every comment on these videos. She wants you to know that she's not ashamed anymore. She wants you to know that surviving manipulation doesn't make you weak. It makes you a warrior. She wants you to know that there's life after betrayal, that you can rebuild, that you can trust again. As for the Holloway family, I think about them sometimes. Not with hatred anymore. Just with a kind of cold understanding. They saw my daughter as a means to an end, a transaction, a stepping stone to wealth they hadn't earned. They saw her weight as a weakness to exploit. They saw her kindness as stupidity. They were so certain of their superiority, their cleverness, their ability to manipulate and deceive. And they lost everything. Their freedom, their reputation, their future. All because they underestimated a mother's love and a daughter's worth. There's a plaque in my dining room now, right where I was standing when I heard Marcus say those horrible words. It's a quote from Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I put it there to remind myself that telling Emily's story, telling our story, might prevent someone else from experiencing the same agony. Every Sunday, Emily and I have lunch together. Sometimes at my house, sometimes at her cottage, sometimes at a restaurant downtown. We talk about art and books and her work at the museum. We talk about her therapy and her healing. We talk about the foundation and the people we're helping. We don't talk about Marcus unless she needs to. We're building new memories, healthy memories, in the spaces where his manipulation used to live. Last week, she told me she's thinking about writing a book, her own account of what happened from her perspective. I told her, I think that's incredibly brave. I told her that her voice matters, that her story could help thousands of people. She smiled at me, a real smile that reached her eyes, and said, I learned from the best. But I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just did what any mother would do. I protected my child. I fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself. I stood up when it mattered most and refused to let evil win. And I want every parent watching this to know, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about the person your child has chosen, investigate that feeling. Don't ignore red flags because you want your child to be happy. Real happiness doesn't come from someone who tears you down. Real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself. I also want every person who's experienced what Emily experienced to know this. You deserved better. You still deserve better. And it's never too late to walk away, to ask for help, to rebuild your life. The shame belongs to the abuser, not to you. The failure is theirs, not yours. 3 months ago, I attended Marcus's parole hearing. He won't be eligible for actual parole for another 12 years, but there was an administrative hearing about prison conditions. I sat in that courtroom and watched him walk in wearing a prison uniform, his shoulders slumped, his face aged beyond his years. He saw me and looked away quickly. At the end of the hearing, I requested permission to address the board. I stood up and looked at Marcus directly. I said, "This man planned to murder my daughter for money. He called her a fat pig. He systematically destroyed her self-esteem so she would be easier to control and easier to kill. He is exactly where he belongs. And I will attend every single parole hearing for the next 25 years to ensure he stays there." Marcus didn't look at me. He stared at his hands the entire time. Good. Let him live with his shame. Let him live with the knowledge that he lost everything because he underestimated the power of a mother's love. Emily didn't come to that hearing. She doesn't need to see him anymore. She's moved on. She's thriving. She's living a life full of art and purpose and genuine human connection. She's dating someone new, a kind man named David who works at the museum with her. He treats her with respect and tenderness. He makes her laugh. He doesn't care about my money or my properties. He cares about her. When Emily introduced us last month, I watched them together carefully. I looked for warning signs, for manipulation, for anything that felt off. But all I saw was a man who looked at my daughter like she hung the moon, who listened when she talked, who supported her work, who made her feel beautiful and valued exactly as she is. And when he asked for my blessing to propose to her in a few months, I gave it. Because this time, I know it's real. This time, the love is genuine. This time, my daughter has chosen someone worthy of her enormous heart. The wedding is planned for next spring. I'm paying for it again, but this time with joy instead of unease. This time, I know I'm celebrating love, not funding a predator's scheme. Emily asked me to walk her down the aisle. She said I'm the one who saved her life. So it's fitting that I be the one to give her away to someone who will cherish it. I think about that afternoon a lot. That Sunday lunch, when everything came to a head. I think about the moment I stood up and smiled at Marcus and told him I knew everything. I think about the look on his face when he realized he'd been caught. And I think about how close we came to losing Emily. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Jennifer Moss hadn't called me, if she'd been too afraid or too ashamed to reach out. Would Marcus have succeeded? Would my daughter be gone? The thought makes me physically ill, but she did call, and I did investigate, and we did catch them, and Emily is alive and healing and building a beautiful life. That's what matters. I want to end this by saying something to anyone who's ever felt like Emily felt. Anyone who's ever been made to feel less than, unworthy, unlovable because of how you look or what you weigh or any other perceived imperfection. You are enough, exactly as you are. Your worth is not determined by your appearance or your dress size or anyone else's opinion of you. You are valuable and deserving of love and respect simply because you exist. And to the predators out there, the people who target vulnerable individuals for their money or their assets or their inheritance, we see you. Mothers like me see you. And we will protect our children with every resource at our disposal. We will set traps and gather evidence and stand up in courtrooms and ensure you face justice. You will not win. Not while mothers like me are watching. Emily is my hero. She survived something that would have destroyed many people. She's rebuilding her life with courage and grace. She's turning her pain into purpose through the foundation and her willingness to share her story. She's proof that you can survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. And I'm grateful. Grateful for Patricia Reeves and Detective Sarah Chen and Thomas Brennan and everyone who helped us. Grateful for a justice system that, for once, worked the way it's supposed to. Grateful that Emily is alive and safe and loved. But most of all, I'm grateful I trusted my instincts. That I didn't ignore the warning signs. That I stood up when it mattered most, because that's what love does. Love protects, love fights, love stands up and says, "Not my child, not on my watch." And love wins, always.